Welcome back to the deep dive. You've brought us a stack of sources today that, well, they paint a pretty terrifying yet absolutely essential picture of global cyber risk.
They really do.
The consensus among security experts, analysts, government figures, it's just crystal clear. The year 2025 was not simply another upward tick on the risk register.
No, it was something else entirely. It was a seismic shift.
A seismic shift. I like that.
That's right. What we're really analyzing today is that specific moment when digital threats graduated from being, a technical problem.
Something for the IT team to handle.
Exactly. A nuisance for the IT team. They graduated from that to a fundamental national economic crisis. Our sources all confirm that 2025 was the tipping point.
And that's our mission today, isn't it? To really unpack what that warning means.
It is. We need to move beyond just the high-level fear and actually quantify the specific, unprecedented surge in these attacks, and then analyze the exact, measurable financial consequences.
We're talking about real economic damage so severe that it actually resulted in national economic contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand this paradigm shift, we have to look at the impact on some cornerstone British businesses. We're talking about Jaguar Land Rover, Marks & Spencer, the Co-op.
Right. And these aren't just isolated data breaches anymore.
Whoa. These were shockwaves. They acted as shockwaves right through the UK's entire productive capacity.
And this all boils down to a core idea that was introduced by Mike Madison. He's the chief executive for the NCC Group, a leading global security firm.
Okay.
He articulated it perfectly. He said that cyber risk is now, and this is a direct quote, intertwined with economic stability and business continuity.
Fundamentally and irrevocably intertwined.
Exactly. Which means the threat landscape, it's no longer assessed by, technical compliance scores.
Yeah.
It's assessed by the ability of a country to maintain its GDP and its employment base.
That really sets the framework for analyzing why boardrooms, why governments are now treating this threat entirely differently.
It has to be different now.
And the initial data, it's just shocking. We've got sources from the National Cybersecurity Center, the NCSC.
Which is the UK's government authority on this.
Right. They reported handling 204 nationally significant attacks. That's in the year leading up to September 2025. And these are incidents serious enough to require, well, national coordination.
And that figure alone, 204 of these high-impact incidents, that's the first real signal of this tipping point.
Just the volume of it.
The sheer volume, the severity, and you couple that with the real-world economic contraction it triggered. It proves that the threat is now systemic.
So we're going to detail the figures that quantify this crisis.
And then we're going to zoom right in on those devastating case studies to show you exactly how this went from being a corporate problem to, well, a national emergency.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we have to start at the highest level of authority, the financial regulators.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when the central bank starts incorporating cyber risk into its national stability assessments, you just know the stakes have become profoundly material.
Absolutely. The warning we got from Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, was probably the strongest endorsement of this elevated threat level.
And he didn't mince words, did he?
Not at all. He stated in completely unequivocal terms that cyber attacks are now one of the most substantial threats to UK financial stability. This isn't just about, a few banks losing some money.
Wow, this is the whole system.
This is about the integrity of the entire financial system.
And when he talks about stability, what does he actually mean by that? Is he worried about, say, a trading house getting hacked, or is it something even more fundamental?
Oh, it's much more fundamental.
Yeah.
He's worried about systemic risk. So you have to think about the infrastructure that allows money to move, that processes our payments, that settles trades in the market.
The plumbing of the economy.
The absolute plumbing. If a major cyber attack were to take down a critical payment system, or if it compromised the data integrity that underpins major asset markets, well, it could lead to a widespread loss of confidence.
A liquidity crisis.
A liquidity crisis. A liquidity crisis.
Right.
And it could halt the entire engine of the economy. That's why the Bank of England is no longer treating this as some external IT risk.
It's a core risk now.
It's a core macro-prudential risk, right alongside inflation, or, a severe supply chain shock like a pandemic.
That is a huge elevation of the threat level. And Bailey wasn't just issuing some vague warning, was he? He was demanding a new operational model.
He was. He stressed and I'm quoting him, critically important need for collaborative defense.
And that's the real shift in strategy.
That is the pivotal shift. For decades, security was largely siloed. Each company was just managing its own firewalls, its own defenses.
Right, you look after your own four walls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the sources show us that the attackers are networked. They share tools, they share information. So Bailey's demand for collaborative defense, it's an acknowledgement that if one systemic failure can impact the entire economy, which we'll prove with JLR, then isolated defense is just self-defeating.
Doesn't work anymore.
It can't. The defense has to be unified. It has to be sharing threat intelligence in real time to build a collective shield against these fast-moving systemic threats.
So if that's the highest political and financial warning, let's drill down into the data that fueled that alarm. Where do the figures confirming this massive surge come from?
For that, we turn to the NCC Group figures. They clearly establish the international scale of this rapid increase, and they focus specifically on the primary weapon being used.
Which is ransomware.
Ransomware. And for anyone listening, so to be really clear what we mean by ransomware, it's malicious software that cybercriminals use to do one of two things.
Okay.
Either they encrypt a victim's critical systems, basically locking a company out of its own data and operations, or they steal highly sensitive data and threaten to release it publicly.
And in both cases.
In either case, they demand a payment, a ransom to restore access, or, to maintain silence.
And the use of this tool, it just exploded at the start of 2025. This wasn't a slow, expected climb.
Not at all. It was a record-breaking surge globally. And that suggests that the criminal ecosystem achieved a terrifying new level of operational maturity and attack velocity.
So what are the numbers?
If you look at the figures for the start of 2025, the growth rate is alarming. There were 590 global ransomware incidents recorded in January 2025.
Okay, 590. And then just 1 month later.
By February 2025, that figure had jumped to 886 incidents.
Wow.
That's nearly a 50% acceleration in the frequency of confirmed attacks in just one calendar month.
And that's not one group.
No, this is not the result of a single group. It shows that the ransomware as a service model, or RAS, had become incredibly efficient. It allows low-skill actors to deploy these high-impact tools on an industrialized scale.
So that velocity means defenses that worked in December were basically obsolete by February?
Completely obsolete.
That rapid industrialized scaling is what's so terrifying. But, when we talk about major national impact, we often think of the biggest banks or utility companies being hit. But your sources confirm that this wave of attacks actually hit the economy's operational backbone, small to medium businesses.
This is a crucial point, and it's why we need to bring in the data from the Hiscox survey. They polled 5,750 global respondents, so it captures the direct lived experience of these small to medium businesses, the SMBs.
And it confirms this isn't just a whale hunting operation targeting the corporate giants.
No, it's a wide net phishing expedition. They're targeting anyone with an operational budget.
So what did that survey show for the SMB sector?
The results are, they're striking, and they really demand attention from every small business owner out there. A staggering 59% of small to medium-sized businesses reported experiencing a cyber attack in the preceding 12 months.
59%. So nearly 2/3 of the economic engine is actively dealing with breaches or attacks?
Yes. And even more concerning, 27% of those SMBs faced a direct ransomware demand.
1 in 4.
1 in 4 smaller businesses being told to pay up or face bankruptcy because of operational paralysis or, a public data leak.
That percentage. That is the moment of truth for so many entrepreneurs because it leads straight to that agonizing dilemma. Should they pay the ransom?
Exactly. It's not a technical problem at that point.
Okay.
It's a profound ethical, legal, and financial tightrope walk.
And the survey gives us some insight into the outcome of that dilemma.
It does. Of those SMBs who did make that difficult decision to pay, often because their backups were also compromised, or their recovery time was just too slow.
Right, they had no choice.
They felt they had no choice. 60% of them managed to recover some or all of their data.
And that 60% success rate, as you say, it's a potent, if very dark, incentive for a desperate business facing an existential threat.
Of course.
But paying is not a simple transaction. It feels like you're just throwing good money after bad, and it must expose them to even more risk down the line.
And here's where the data gets truly sobering. This is where the criminal intent becomes crystal clear. 31% of those who paid reported that the attackers demanded further payments after the initial ransom was delivered.
So a third of them.
Also, a third of victims essentially purchased a subscription to be extorted again. Just think about that for a moment.
That completely shatters the illusion that paying a ransom is a one-time cost to make the problem go away. How do the attackers even maintain that leverage after the first files are decrypted?
Well, often they'll retain the most sensitive data that they stole, and they use the threat of a secondary public release, this is often called double extortion, to keep the pressure on.
Okay.
And more sophisticated groups, they also embed secondary persistent backdoors into the victim's network during that initial intrusion. So even if the main encryption is unlocked, the attacker still has access to disrupt operations again at any time.
So the victim is just trapped.
They're trapped, and the criminal has zero incentive for integrity once that first payment is made. Their only incentive is to maximize their profit.
That 31% figure, that's a catastrophic failure of risk management. It turns a one-time crisis into a chronic vulnerability.
It does.
Which means the only viable long-term solution is to build resilience that is so strong that paying isn't a financially necessary option in the first place.
Which brings us back, full circle, to that shift in the national perspective.
To the NCSC data.
Exactly. We mentioned it earlier, and it provides the clearest statistical evidence of this tipping point that forced government action. As a reminder, the NCSC reported handling 204 nationally significant cyber attacks in the year September 2025.
And you compare that to the previous year, where the figure was just 89.
Just 89.
More than doubling the number of nationally significant incidents in a single year. That's an exponential spike. It proves the threat wasn't just growing, it was accelerating at pace.
And Mike Madison's summary of this data perfectly encapsulates the central theme of this deep dive. He said that compared to previous years, these attacks have been more far-reaching and costly.
And his conclusion?
His undeniable conclusion is that cybersecurity is, and I quote, no longer just an IT concern, but is fundamental to the UK's long-term growth and resilience. The NCSC's involvement in 204 incidents means that the government is constantly in emergency mode, measuring cyber risk in terms of anticipated GDP loss, not just server logs.
So we've quantified the scale. A massive surge in industrialized ransomware, widespread impact on SMBs, and a gibbling of government-level crisis incidents. Now let's shift focus and examine the specific real-world cost and disruption by looking at the case studies that truly define 2025 as the tipping point.
And we absolutely have to begin with Jaguar Land Rover JLR. This incident is the undisputed, definitive proof that cyber attacks have transitioned from being expensive corporate events into macroeconomic GDP contracting disasters. This went so far beyond company finances, it became a national fiscal concern.
Okay, let's detail the event itself. What happened at JLR, and why did the operational impact become so catastrophic?
So the attack occurred on September 1st, 2025. Now, JLR runs a massive, incredibly complex manufacturing operation based on just-in-time logistics.
Meaning parts are ordered and delivered exactly when needed?
Exactly when needed to minimize inventory costs. The hack targeted their critical planning and logistics systems, and it just instantly broke that chain.
And the consequence?
It was immediate and sweeping.
Yeah.
JLR was forced to halt production across all of its UK factories. This was not a localized disruption. This was a complete company-wide operational freeze.
For how long?
It lasted for 5 weeks.
5 weeks of zero output for one of the UK's largest automotive manufacturers. The financial damage to JLR itself must have been instantly devastating.
It was monumental. The disruption led to a revenue plunge of over £1 billion for the quarter ending in September.
1 billion.
Yes. And that translates into a significant loss for the company, even before you calculate the massive cost of recovery, remediation, and the inevitable surge in insurance premiums. It showed that for a complex manufacturing entity, the cost of downtime just dwarfs every other expense associated with a breach.
But the truly unprecedented part, the part that made security experts issue that tipping point warning, was the national consequence. How did one company's failure translate into a contraction of the entire UK economy?
And this is the critical linkage. When a company the size of JLR stops production for 5 weeks, it ripples through the economy in several ways. First, the reduction in output directly lowers the manufacturing component of the gross domestic product GDP. JLR's shutdown was explicitly cited by analysts as a key factor causing the UK economy to contract in both September and October.
So the economic measure, the amount of goods and services produced, it physically shrunk because JLR couldn't make cars.
Precisely. And secondly, the impact wasn't contained to JLR. Just-in-time systems rely on Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers.
Hundreds of smaller businesses.
Hundreds of them, all feeding components into the factories. When JLR stopped buying, those suppliers had to slow or stop production too, creating this cascade of lost output and furloughs right across the automotive supply chain.
This is the definition of a systemic failure. It proves Andrew Bailey's warning was completely sound.
It does. And the staggering figure attached to this event confirms its severity.
What was the final number?
Experts from the nonprofit Cyber Monitoring Center, after analyzing the GDP hit, the lost exports, the supply chain effects, they estimated the incident cost the country around $1.9 billion.
Almost 2 billion pounds.
They explicitly labeled it the most financially damaging cyber event ever to hit the UK. That figure, $1.9 billion, that is the measurable cost of the 2025 tipping point. It demonstrated this devastating system-wide vulnerability when operational technology meets a determined cyber threat.
That covers the severe macroeconomic operational impact. Now let's shift focus to the retail sector with Marks & Spencer M&S, where the threat was a dual hit: operational paralysis and severe customer trust erosion through a data compromise.
Yes, this M&S case study is vital because it illustrates the vulnerability of large-scale logistics and customer-facing infrastructure, particularly when it's timed around high-demand commercial periods.
The attackers aren't just targeting data, they're targeting peak profitability.
Exactly. M&S was targeted around the busy Easter weekend, a key period for apparel and food retail. The core issue was the paralysis of their back-end logistics systems.
And what was the immediate operational fallout from that?
The primary disruption was the forced suspension of all online orders for approximately 6 weeks.
6 weeks? That's an eternity in retail.
It's an eternity. It effectively eliminated a major revenue stream.
Hmm.
And furthermore, because the systems governing distribution to physical stores were also compromised, it led to visible operational chaos.
Like empty shelves.
Visibly empty shelves in physical locations. This clearly showed the public that the attack didn't just affect the digital storefront, it crippled the physical ability to stock and distribute goods.
6 weeks without online sales, empty shelves. That is a massive hole in revenue, even for a retailer the size of M&S. What was the resulting financial toll reported?
M&S reported a significant loss in sales totaling $324 million.
Wow.
All due to the sustained outage and logistics failure. That is a massive hit to the bottom line, demonstrating that exponential cost of operational downtime.
But there's a vital detail here regarding corporate resilience that we need to highlight: the role of insurance.
Precisely. Unlike companies that might have self-insured or, lacked adequate coverage, M&S managed to recover $100 million through an insurance payout.
So that's a huge chunk.
It is, and it highlights the growing importance, the necessity, really, of robust cyber insurance in mitigating these enormous sudden losses. It helps buffer the immediate financial shock, and it provides capital for recovery operations. It proves that proper risk transfer mechanisms are key to surviving one of these tipping point events.
But even with that partial financial recovery, the reputational damage and the customer data compromise, those are uninsured losses. What specific customer information was put at risk in the M&S incident?
It was customer personal data, what's known in the security world as personally identifiable information, or PII.
Right.
This included names, email addresses, postal addresses, and dates of birth. Now, while the exact scope of malicious use is difficult to track immediately, the exposure of this type of PII is corrosive to customer trust. It invites mass media scrutiny, and it guarantees intensive regulatory scrutiny under GDPR rules.
And M&S wasn't isolated, was it? This was part of a broader pattern of targeting retailers.
That's absolutely right. When you contextualize the M&S incident, you see that other prominent retail victims included the luxury department store Harrods and the supermarket group Co-op.
So a real range of targets.
Yes, the attack showed that the threat actor is opportunistic. Whether you are a high-end luxury brand like Harrods, whose customers are high-value targets for later fraud, or a staple community supermarket like Co-op, if you hold large volumes of customer data, you are a prime target.
And the data point from the Co-op is one of the most sobering figures in our sources. It illustrates the massive personal scale of individual data loss during 2025.
It truly puts a human face on these breach statistics. The Co-op's chief confirmed that data belonging to all 6.5 million of its members had been stolen.
All of them.
All 6.5 million. That is a gigantic breach of individual privacy and trust. When we talk about 6.5 million people, we're talking about a major fraction of the UK population having their basic identifying information exposed through a single cyber incident.
So while JLR represents the $1.9 billion cost to the economy,
A Co-op breach represents the massive ongoing cost to the individual citizen in terms of identity theft risk, unsolicited spam, and future phishing phishing attempts.
So 2025 gave us the three major dimensions of the threat: macroeconomic paralysis at JLR, logistics failure and trust erosion at M&S, and massive individual data exposure at Co-op. It was a complete spectrum failure.
It really was. And having established the catastrophic cost of 2025, we now have to pivot and look forward because the threat doesn't stand still.
Right.
Mike Madison's warning is the perfect transition. He said that 2025 should be seen as a clear warning, not a one-off peak, which strongly suggests we're now operating in a new, permanently elevated threat environment.
And that prediction isn't just speculation. It's grounded in the analysis of how criminal methodologies are evolving, how they're adopting technology. Our sources point to two key vectors that will define future attacks: the increasing weaponized leverage of artificial intelligence by attackers and the continued critical vulnerability of complex supply chains.
Let's start with AI. This represents a truly revolutionary shift in attack capability. How is this technology actually being weaponized to change the threat landscape?
Well, it fundamentally lowers the barrier to entry, and it increases the sophistication of every single attempt. Cybercriminals are expected to increasingly leverage large language models, LLMs, the tech behind tools like ChatGPT, to rapidly enhance the scale and sophistication of phishing attempts.
So no more badly spelled emails.
Exactly. Historically, phishing emails were often riddled with grammatical errors or looked obviously fake. But now, using AI, threat actors can craft these highly contextual, grammatically flawless, hyper-personalized spear phishing messages.
They can tailor it to the individual.
An AI can scrape a victim's public profile, analyze their communication patterns, and generate a message that mimics the tone and urgency of a senior executive or a trusted vendor. This makes it exponentially harder for human employees, who are always the weakest link to spot fraudulent communications.
Which massively improves the success rate of that initial breach.
Exactly. So AI helps them get past the human defense layer. What about the technical side of actually finding the vulnerabilities?
Well, that's the second major application. AI is superb at identifying system vulnerabilities far more rapidly than human penetration testers or analysts ever could. It can automatically scan vast corporate networks, analyze configuration files, compare those against known exploit databases, and then pinpoint the weakest link in the chain.
Whether it's outdated software
Or a misconfigured cloud instance or a loophole in a partner system, it finds it.
And this sounds like it's just dramatically accelerating the entire attack timeline.
It is. AI dramatically shortens the time between reconnaissance, that initial scanning and learning phase, and exploitation, the actual attack. If human teams needed weeks to find an obscure vulnerability, AI can potentially do it in minutes.
Which just accelerates the threat velocity we talked about earlier.
It forces defenders to react at machine speed.
Now, let's move to the other predicted key target: the supply chain. We saw the profound impact this had on JLR. Why will supply chains remain the golden ticket for attackers going forward?
Because supply chains are inherently a chain of trust. And the complexity of that trust relationship is precisely why they remain irresistible targets. A modern corporation, whether the car manufacturer or a major retailer like M&S, it relies on dozens, if not hundreds, of third-party vendors for everything.
Specialized components, outsourced IT.
Logistics software, cloud hosting, the list goes on.
It's the weakest link strategy applied at a massive industrial scale.
Exactly. Attacking a small, less secure vendor, maybe a niche engineering firm with fewer resources for defense, often provides criminals with the perfect backdoor into the much larger, more valuable primary target like JLR.
And because modern supply chains are so interconnected,
when a critical link is compromised, disruption just spreads instantly across sectors. We saw the knock-on effect at JLR. If one niche component supplier is taken offline, 5 weeks of car production can just vanish.
And that massive, rapid, widespread disruption is the primary leverage the attackers are looking for.
That's what they want. It dramatically increases the pressure on the primary target to pay ransoms quickly to restore economic order, often regardless of the supplier's immediate ability to pay. It's a mechanism designed to generate maximum collateral damage, which thereby guarantees a rapid payment.
But amid all this escalating threat, our sources also signal a necessary positive counterpoint: improving corporate maturity. It seems the shock of the 2025 attacks finally forced boardrooms to fundamentally shift their priorities.
They had to.
Acknowledging that they can't simply build a higher wall.
And that shift, which Madison emphasized in his analysis, is vital. Boards are beginning to recognize that true cyber resilience goes beyond prevention and detection.
Right.
For years, the security budget was heavily focused on keeping intruders out, firewalls, perimeter defense, employee training, antivirus suites. That's the prevention model.
But JLR and M&S prove that no matter how good your prevention is, if your operational downtime is measured in weeks, you lose billions.
Exactly. So the new resilience model accepts that a breach is, at some point, inevitable. The focus is shifting from keeping them out to how fast you can kick them out and restart operations.
And that signals a major investment pivot toward disaster recovery and business continuity planning.
It does. We're seeing budgets dedicated to achieving very low recovery time objectives, or RTOs, the acceptable duration of downtime.
And how does that look practically inside a corporation?
It means investing heavily in things like immutable backups data copies that cannot be encrypted or deleted by the attackers, even if they gain root access to the network.
Okay.
It means performing regular, realistic fire drills where companies intentionally simulate a catastrophic system failure just to test their ability to recover core functions. This requires integrating cybersecurity planning not just with IT, but with every aspect of the organization: legal, finance, manufacturing, communications.
The driver being the memory of that $1.9 billion economic hit.
It makes this a survival investment.
The scale of the economic damage we've detailed inevitably prompted a strong reaction from the highest level of government. I mean, when cyber failures start contracting the national economy and impacting millions of citizens, legislation is sure to follow
It has
to force compliance. So what is the government developing in response to the 2025 tipping point?
The primary legislative answer is the development of the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. This bill is the direct policy consequence of those 204 nationally significant attacks the NCSC recorded. Its core purpose is to introduce real legal teeth to corporate compliance that, well, currently doesn't exist.
So previously, security compliance felt more like a recommendation, a market best practice. What mechanism are they introducing to enforce better security practices now?
The bill aims to empower regulators to find companies that fail to comply with defined baseline cybersecurity regulations. And this is a massive change in the regulatory landscape.
So the risk of inaction now includes a guaranteed significant government financial penalty.
Yes, adding further financial pressure onto CEOs and boards.
This essentially transforms cybersecurity from a cost center into a strict regulatory compliance mandate, similar to how environmental safety or financial disclosure rules operate.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right.
You risk a fine if you don't meet the minimum standards. And this is vital because it addresses the historical problem of underinvestment. If a company views cybersecurity purely as a competitive advantage, they might skimp on the basics.
But if they view it as a compliance mandate,
They must invest. The bill compels that baseline level of defense across sectors deemed essential, raising the floor for national resilience.
Now, perhaps the most nuanced and contentious part of this legislative discussion concerns the payment of ransoms themselves. This is where the Home Office has introduced a really fascinating multi-layered proposal. What are the specific details regarding ransom payments?
The Home Office proposals introduce a significant regulatory divide. They're treating core infrastructure very differently from the broader private sector. For the vast majority of private businesses, like many of the SMBs we talked about, there's a new requirement. They will be mandated to notify the government if they intend to pay a ransom to cyber criminals.
So they aren't banning payments for private companies, but they are forcing transparency. What's the purpose of that notification requirement?
Well, the mandate serves several intelligence purposes. Firstly, it gives the government visibility into the criminal market. Which threat actors are successful? What ransomware variants are they using? What payment demands are being accepted?
Right, they get the data.
This data is crucial for the NCSC to track and proactively disrupt these groups. And secondly, it helps the government understand the economic mechanics of extortion. They recognize the existential dilemma faced by a private company that needs to pay, but they want the data trail attached to that payment.
So understanding the market without preventing the victim from making a necessary commercial decision. But this approach is very different for the other group critical national infrastructure, or CNI.
Indeed. And CNI needs a clear definition for anyone listening. This refers to the assets, systems, and networks that are essential for the functioning of society and the economy.
So power grids, water supply.
Power grids, water supply, major communication networks, the core banking systems. For these entities, the rules are much, much stricter. Public sector bodies and operators of critical national infrastructure will be explicitly prohibited from making such payments.
A complete ban. Why the complete prohibition for CNI, but only a notification requirement for the private sector?
The rationale is pure national security and sovereignty. CNI operators are so fundamental to societal and economic function that their operational failure cannot be tolerated, and furthermore, they cannot be allowed to fund organized crime or potentially state-sponsored terrorism. The ban is a strategic move designed to eliminate the financial incentive for attackers targeting these specific, high-value foundational nodes.
And it forces a massive investment in redundancy, doesn't it? If they can't pay their way out of a crisis, their preparation for catastrophic failure has to be absolute.
Absolutely. The ban sends an undeniable message. Any reliance on paying a criminal organization to restore essential services is deemed an unacceptable national security risk. The CNI operators must rely purely on superior preparation, immutable backups, massive redundancy, and rapid recovery capabilities. And if they fail to comply—
The threat of the massive regulatory fines under the new bill will be the enforcement mechanism.
Exactly. This shift truly cements cyber resilience as a national security imperative, far, far beyond just commercial interests.
We have covered so much ground today, and it really does confirm that 2025 represents an irreversible tipping point in global cyber risk. Let's just briefly reiterate the most memorable and measurable facts for you, the learner, to walk away with.
I think the metrics of disruption are just staggering. We saw that immediate radical surge in attacks, evidenced by the doubling of nationally significant incidents reported by the NCSC from 89 to 204 in a single year.
And the case studies provided the hard financial data. The JLR incident cost the country an estimated $1.9 billion. That's severe enough to contract the national economy for 2 months.
And the retail chaos at M&S. That resulted in $324 million in lost sales and 6 weeks of logistics failure. It proved that even massive enterprises can be operationally paralyzed by a digital attack.
And most alarmingly, the impact on the individual citizen was confirmed by the co-op data breach, which saw the personal information of 6.5 million members compromised. Cyber risk is now measured in terms of GDP contraction, not just lost data packets.
Right. So what here is fundamental. The definition of cyber resilience has changed entirely. It is no longer an optional expenditure that can be deferred or deprioritized. It is a mandatory core investment required for national economic security, for business continuity, and for regulatory compliance.
And the focus is permanently shifting.
Permanently shifting from just preventing the breach to ensuring that companies can survive the inevitable breach and recover their core operations rapidly.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought. The government's new proposals are designed to protect the most essential functions, prohibiting critical national infrastructure from paying ransoms. This is an undeniable strategic move to eliminate the financial incentive for targeting the grid or water systems.
But if we consider the deep economic leverage that ransomware gangs exert on complex supply chains, this raises a really important question. What challenges might this outright CNI ban create for the non-critical private sector companies that rely on those protected utilities?
But are still allowed to pay a ransom.
Yes. Does this essentially create a new fault line in the supply chain? One where the private companies who can pay a ransom are now solely responsible for preventing a failure that could cascade into the CNI sector, but without the explicit protection or investment of the CNI mandate.
Does this just shift the burden of absolute cyber defense more heavily onto specific nodes in the supply chain?
It forces strategic thinking about where the risk truly lies in an interconnected system. And perhaps it demands that the private sector proactively plan for the inability of their essential utility partners to ever pay their way out of a crisis. That is the true challenge of resilience in the post-2025 landscape.
A fascinating, essential deep dive today. Thank you for guiding us through these critical sources.
Always a pleasure.
Until the next deep dive, stay resilient.